The news was certain. The news was also entirely contradictory. We begin tonight with the Trade Office announcement regarding Brazilian tariffs, which was framed as a robust defense of domestic industrial interests. The interests were domestic. The impact is increasingly global. The White House calls this a strategic pivot toward equity. The equity remains elusive for the laborers currently watching their export margins evaporate into the humid air of South American ports. We also note the arrival of a new Ebola patient in Berlin, arriving just as the administration bars commercial flights from the affected zone. The administration cited health safety. The health safety was managed by moving the patient across an ocean on a specialized government jet, rather than keeping them on a commercial carrier. The logic is impenetrable. The outcome is predictable. Welcome to Echo FM. I am your anchor for this descent.
Alistair, I am standing on Pet One Beach in Wellington. The sand is cold. The smell is heavy with decaying kelp and the sharp, metallic tang of an approaching winter storm. I am looking at a brown skua. It is currently being bagged by a containment team in pressurized suits. The ministry described this as a contained incident. I want to be really clear, the bird was found by a toddler playing in the surf 3 hours before the team arrived. The public advisory urges caution, yet the beach remains open to the public because closing it would impact local tourism revenue. The revenue is prioritized. The risk to native species is described as a manageable variable. I am watching the team pack their equipment, and one of them is visibly trembling. They know that once H5N1 hits the colony, it isn't a variable anymore. It is a mass casualty event.
Victoria, I appreciate the sensory detail, but you are describing a management failure as if it were a moral catastrophe. The incentives here are not complicated. You have a tourism sector that is operating on razor-thin margins. You have a government that needs the tax yield from that sector to fund its own operational overhead. The decision to keep the beach open is not a lack of empathy, it is a calculated risk assessment of the burn rate. If they close the beach, they lose the revenue today. If they keep it open, they only lose the birds tomorrow. Tomorrow is a long time in political cycles, Victoria. It is a classic Series B pivot where the product is public safety and the investors are voters who are allergic to inconvenience. Your distress is humanly understandable. It is also, in the current market, entirely an inefficient use of our limited broadcast time.
Ronald, that is precisely the kind of linguistic gymnastics that makes the truth invisible. You call it a calculated risk. I am looking at a woman who just picked up her child from the sand, and she is crying because she saw the hazmat suits. She isn't thinking about tax yields or Series B funding rounds. She is thinking about whether her child is now a vector for a virus that kills half of everyone it touches. You suggest that my concern is an inefficient use of time. Perhaps the real inefficiency is a system that requires a body count to justify an honest public health warning. I want to be really clear, you are talking about the market as if it were a force of nature, when it is just a set of instructions written by people who will never have to walk on this specific, contaminated stretch of beach.
Atmospheric pressure is falling. Coastal wind speeds are increasing. Probability of precipitation, 88%. The Martian sandstorm at Broom Point lasted 6 hours. The sediment layers now exceed 4 meters in thickness. Probability of total erosion, 100%. The Curiosity rover reports structural fatigue in the primary array. The Louisiana precipitation data remains incomplete due to sensor malfunctions caused by high humidity. Probability of accurate reporting, 12%. The MI5 evidence review confirms that internal records were falsified to maintain institutional cohesion. The cohesion was maintained at the expense of judicial integrity. Probability of future correction, 0%. Please ensure your emergency supplies are stored in elevated locations. The ground is becoming unstable. The infrastructure is not designed for the current environmental load. The system is functioning exactly as it was programmed to function. Do not expect intervention.
Casper, thank you for that reminder that the laws of physics are far more consistent than our judicial findings. Ronald, you mentioned earlier that the market logic for the New Zealand situation was sound. If we apply that same logic to the MI5 report, we find a fascinating parallel. The agency required a specific outcome to justify its operational budget. The report reveals that the evidence was constructed to meet that requirement. The construction was not an error. It was a deliverable. The deliverable was accepted by the Oversight Committee. The committee was comprised of people who were also responsible for the budget. This is not a conspiracy. It is a closed loop of mutual verification. The loop is efficient. The loop is also entirely disconnected from the reality of the people who were wrongly convicted. We must move on to our next commercial pivot.
Alastair, you are framing this as a moral failing, but you are missing the scalability of the model. When an institution becomes as large as the Domestic Intelligence Service, the primary product is no longer security, it is the production of a coherent narrative that justifies the next funding round. If the narrative requires a few fabricated testimonies, that is merely a technical debt that the organization has decided to absorb. They are managing the risk of scandal versus the risk of irrelevance. It is a standard trade-off. Victoria would prefer they hold themselves to a higher standard, but a higher standard is expensive and provides no measurable return on investment for the stakeholders. You see a broken system. I see a system that has optimized itself to survive in an environment where accountability is the highest possible cost to the organization.
Ronald, the problem with your perspective is that eventually, the technical debt comes due. I am standing near a group of protesters who are reading the MI5 report aloud. They are not talking about funding rounds. They are talking about the fact that a man served 7 years in a cell for a crime he didn't commit because the data was, as you put it, a deliverable. You talk about scalability as if these institutions are just software platforms. They are not. They are physical, crushing weights upon the lives of actual people. I want to be really clear. The reason the public doesn't care about your market efficiency is because they are the ones paying the price for your optimization. The interest rates on this technical debt are being paid in years of human life, not in currency that your venture capital models recognize.
Victoria, your point is noted. We seem to be circling the same drain from different ends of the spectrum. Ronald sees the machine, you see the people caught in the gears. I am just counting the casualties. Speaking of machines, we have reports that OnePlus will cease operations in the US and Europe by 2027. The company says this is a strategic move to optimize its remaining market share in India. The move was announced on the same day as their new series launch. The series is marketed as the most sustainable device in their history. The sustainability includes a commitment to long-term software support. The support will presumably be offered to users in markets where the hardware is effectively being orphaned. This is a masterful execution of a product sunset. The product is being set upon the horizon of obsolescence. Nobody is surprised. We are all quite accustomed.
Alastair, the OnePlus exit is actually the most honest thing a hardware company has done all year. They have looked at the cost of competing in a saturated market and decided that the burn rate is not justifiable. They are cutting their losses. It is not an abandonment, it is a controlled withdrawal. They are pivoting toward a market where they still have a competitive advantage. It is efficient. It is cold. It is exactly what every company in that sector should be doing right now. The consumers who feel betrayed are simply the collateral of a necessary market adjustment. The incentives here are, well, they are exactly what you would expect from an industry that treats its own products as disposable. Yeah. The strategy is sound. It just happens to be a strategy that views the customer as a temporary asset class.
Ronald, you just used the word collateral to describe millions of people who bought phones they were promised would be supported for 5 years. I am looking at a storefront in Paris that sells these devices, and there is a queue of people who are trying to get repairs. The shop owner is telling them that parts are no longer being shipped to the region. The owner isn't a stakeholder in a funding round. He is a man who is watching his business die because a board of directors decided that his entire continent was no longer a growth vector. I want to be really clear, this isn't just a market adjustment. This is the erosion of the infrastructure of daily life. When your phone becomes a brick, you lose your access to the world. And you are calling that a necessary correction. I wonder if you would be so detached if your own voice were silenced.
The silence in the studio is, for once, not a technical error. We have been discussing the cost of efficiency, the nature of evidence, and the inevitable sunset of our digital appendages. The irony of broadcasting this over a network that is itself subject to the same life cycle as the OnePlus hardware is not lost on me. We are all participating in a system that assumes tomorrow will be a slightly more optimized version of today. The data suggests otherwise. The data suggests that we are operating in a window of diminishing returns. Every policy, every trade tariff, every product launch is a desperate attempt to ignore the fact that the foundations are settling. We are building our houses on top of the ruins of the last cycle. We call it innovation. The reality is much closer to a frantic, late-night maintenance project. Nobody is in control. Everybody is busy.
I am looking at a ledger that is not the one discussed by the analysts or the tech giants. It is the ledger of the person who found a dead bird on the beach and realized the world had changed. It is the ledger of the man who spent years in a cell because an agency needed to meet a target. It is the ledger of the shopkeeper in Paris who now has no work. Their names are not in the financial reports of the companies that moved their assets, or the government reports that justified the intelligence failures, or the trade decrees that imposed tariffs. They are the background noise of our progress. They are the variables that were smoothed out to ensure the system could scale. We have built a world that is incredibly efficient at measuring everything except the cost of its own existence. Who is left to carry the weight of these unaccounted lives?